Welcome. Just give me a second to let the laptop catch up because I can't see what the camera looks like until it does. Um, Good enough, I suppose. Yeah. So if you saw the last, it's a little bit crooked, huh? If you saw the last episode of Grateful Dead Magic, um, and found it interesting, tonight should be even more interesting. I think I have a lot of really crazy stories and insights about the band. There's the Egyptian prophecy of the Djed. Sorry about the crazy camera. I'll get it straightened out. The lag makes it really hard to get this stuff right. The Egyptian prophecy of the Djed is really insane. And then there's also Donna's story, which is pretty amazing, really inspiring. This idea that's very popular regarding, oh shit, has there been no audio, I bet, this whole time? Okay, the audio should be fixed now. Sorry about that. Is the audio working? Okay, there we go. There we go. All right, but I have to turn this volume down because the lag will drive me nuts. It's crazy that all 9 people just bailed instead of just telling me that the audio wasn't working. So anyways, Donna Jean Godchild's amazing story of how she got into the band. If you are looking for a reason to believe in the ability of the mind to manifest things, or even just a story to inspire you to have the courage to try to do something impossible. And it was really cool that I got to hear this directly from Donna's mouth. I mean, this is a woman that basically just decided she was going to be in the Grateful Dead. And before it was all over, she would watch the sunrise sitting on top of the Great Pyramid with Jerry Garcia on LSD, which is just, that sounds like some hippie fantasy or something that would just never happen for anyone. But so we'll get to that story, and then we're going to talk about the curse of the Grateful Dead keyboardists. If you've ever seen the movie Spinal Tap, where the drummers explode, that was actually based on this Grateful Dead phenomenon. So where should we start? How about a quick recap of the last episode? Basically, I was asserting that the Grateful Dead are the most important cultural phenomena, certainly in modern history and possibly ever, because they provided an environment that facilitated actual experience of the universal mind, of the collective consciousness, and there's something about this experience that changes people in a very profound way. And so it's one thing to hear, that it's that we're all one, and most people kind of accept it, partly because I think we all know this stuff deep down inside, but it also just kind of sounds nice. But it's an entirely different thing to experience it. When people smoke bufotenine, the 5-MeO DMT from the bufo toad, they experience this unity consciousness, and that's kind of an extreme version of this experience, but it's of the same order, I guess. And so it's definitely a type of gnosis. It's a direct experience of the transcendental. And so there was something about the consciousness of the musicians transfers in the music that they're playing to some extent, and this can be most easily observed by the fact that the Grateful Dead really didn't sing their message literally, but there was something very specific that was communicated to the audience nevertheless. And so from the moment you got out of the car in the parking lot, you would notice that there was an energy that was different, that people were treating you differently, and it's still like that to an extent to this day. It is definitely weakened. But I just read a really great story online today. Actually, a woman lost her son who was a Deadhead, and she was very Christian and thought that they were a satanic bunch of drug addicts, and hated that her son went. And one of her son's friends talked her into going to see Dead and Company, and she thought it was amazing. She totally got everything that I'm talking about somehow, even through her preconception that it was a very negative scene. And so I think it's really quite remarkable that, you know, when it's like nothing but hippies and, you know, out of the box, fringe sort of people like me saying this type of stuff, I think it's easier to dismiss. But, you know, I took my ex-wife's mother, who was a doctor, to see further, and she understood all of this too. You know, my partner Enrica, there's just something about it that people just, even without being, what is it called when the military, you know, they debrief you. Without being debriefed, people will, you know, sometimes within minutes of being exposed to the music, they're able to articulate this sort of almost metaphysical effect that this music has on people. And it's not something, yeah, I don't know why that happens. I mean, I'm in Ecuador. The internet's not that good. I was trying to get OBS to work by today, but the sound lag is too bad. So I have to try to figure out what's going on with that. So I apologize if the sound and the picture are not good, but second world country, what are you gonna do? And so you know, this exposure to the universal mind, this ability to facilitate gnosis in the people that came to the concerts, the community that was created around the band, and the fact that they actually were responsible for the distribution of most of the psychedelics in the United States throughout the period where that culture was more or less dead, that, you know, are what make the Grateful Dead the most important cultural phenomena of the 20th century and probably the last several centuries. And the reason why the music still persists to this day and is still so popular. You know, we have the 80-year-old members of the Grateful Dead still out there filling football stadiums with John Mayer. So, and that's the reason. It's the authenticity and the fact that you'll experience genuine magic oftentimes at these shows. You know, as Joseph Campbell said in all of his travels of the world as a Harvard mythologist, he only ever felt that he witnessed actual natural magic twice, or in two different places, in the jungles of Borneo and also at Grateful Dead concerts. And I think that's a hell of a thing to hear from, you know, Harvard brain, basically. So another element that some people theorize about where the Grateful Dead got their magic was that their music was actually haunted. And the reason, or that it picked up these spirits, and the reason that that was suggested is that they played a lot of, I guess, folk covers. They weren't exactly covers, they were renditions of old folk stories. So Dupree's Diamond Blues, for example, that was based on a story of a guy that shot a pawn shop owner in order to get a diamond ring for his wife. And so he, in the Grateful Dead telling of the story, the judge, as he's sentencing him to life in prison, tells Dupree that he had been sleeping with his fiance. And so he says, you know, I understand why you would kill for that jelly roll, which was old blues slang for vagina. That sweet, sweet jelly's so good. So, you know, and then Casey Jones was about an actual guy. And his mythos may fit the Grateful Dead best of all of these ghosts that they were carrying around, because he would not have been famous if he didn't die a horrible death. So is he gratefully dead? And I, you know, I feel like that was kind of an intentional aspect of their choosing, you know, an influence in the choice of folk heroes to keep alive, the ones that they allowed to haunt them. Casey Jones' house is now a museum. It can be found on I-40, I think in Kansas, in the United States. And so what happened was he was driving the train, and no one knows if he was actually high on cocaine, but it's true that the switchman was sleeping and he didn't throw the tracks. And so the train crashed head on into another train, And legend has it that when they got Casey Jones' skeleton out of the wreckage, the steam line had broken and melted off all of his skin, all of his guts. So he was basically just bones and tendons holding the brake line, which is an incredibly gruesome image. And so Casey Jones, another example of this, carrying these real people's stories, and there's quite a number of them. Let's see, what's another one? There was wealthy merchant Jackarow. Jackarow is also probably based on a real person that well, they didn't die actually; they ended up getting married. So there's this carrying of the spirits of all of these dead people. This is one of the ideas that people have about why the Grateful Dead's music has this weird supernatural power. Who knows? Maybe it's not true, but if you're immersed in it, it's not hard to believe that it could be true. And then there's another prophecy involving a Native American medicine man named Rolling Thunder. I think he was Sioux. I'm not really sure. I can't recall. But he actually journeyed to San Francisco to find Garcia, who at the time was extremely sick. In fact, people were worried that he was going to die. I think this was like 1967 or 68. And so Garcia had some kind of flu or something. He was, deathly ill. And so the golden not Golden Light Eagle, that was the medicine man I was working with. Rolling Thunder comes to the house where Garcia is sick, and he has an owl wing, and he does some sort of shamanic cleansing on Garcia and draws the energy of the illness into him with this owl wing that he's flapping. And then he runs outside trembling and vomiting and becomes very ill for a few days himself. Garcia almost immediately got better. And what Rolling Thunder had actually come to tell Garcia is that there was this prophecy of this rainbow tribe, and that they believed that there would be a tribe that consisted of members of all of the tribes. They would be very colorful people in their dress and appearance, which kind of sounds like tie-dye, right? And that they would reverse the white man's world and change the trajectory of the path of destruction that we were all on, and that Garcia would be the leader of this movement of the Rainbow Tribe. And that is remarkable in its accuracy. I think that really, whether people realize it or not, as I was said in the last live stream, even if you aren't directly exposed to the shows and you don't listen to the music, you've still been profoundly affected by the Grateful Dead. It's also said that, well, it's true actually, that there's a paper trail that Garcia's, his estate paid for the bulk of the legal crap for the medical marijuana to be passed in California. And so, that was the beginning of a movement that is sweeping the nation and legalizing marijuana, and hopefully we'll get a whole lot of people out of jail. So the impact of this band is still, aside from the current incarnation, it's something that is still, the ripple of it is still, moving through the population and causing changes and evolution. Okay, so that's the Native American prophecy, which sounds like it was pretty accurate. He also told them that the band would end. They would play their last concert on August 8th or July 8th, whatever the date of the last show was. I can't recall now. I think it was July 9th, 1995. He told them the band would end on July 9th, and the Dead said they were terrified every year for a while because they thought it was maybe this July. And of course it did end up ending on that date that Rolling Thunder gave them. Okay, so while we're talking about prophecies, let's talk about the Djed. This one is probably the craziest. So in 1977, Garcia had the idea. Actually, they'd been bouncing it around for a while, but Garcia said, "Hey, let's actually try to do this." And so they were private shows. You couldn't buy tickets. They sent out 500 tickets to fans. Um, and then they brought like Bill Walton, the basketball player, and David Gans, who I actually got to have lunch with and listen to stories of riding camels around with the Grateful Dead. And so they wanted to play the Pyramids, and no one had ever done this before. There had never been a rock concert at the Giza Light and Sound stage, and so they said, let's see if they'll actually let us do it. And they flew out to Egypt, and they talked to, I guess it would be the ambassador. And the guy said, well, why do you want to do this? Is it because you've discovered that your music changes when you play in different places? And speaking of that, I should mention that one of the other remarkable characteristics of the Grateful Dead is that if you listen to a fall show, you can hear the colored leaves in the music. Like, they absorbed the environment. Spring shows sound like springtime. Winter shows sound like winter. They were extraordinarily adept at being empathic with not only the audience, but the entirety of the sensory inputs, you know, that they could absorb and use that to keep the music fresh and in tune with where they are and what they're doing and who is there. You can also tell the personality of the demographic in the crowd. New York shows have a sort of swagger and, you know, sound almost overconfident, and Texas shows are, you know, some of it was just adapting. They would play more cowboy songs in Texas. But, you know, you can hear where they are. So, you know, I don't want to get too far off of the Giza story, but I just thought I should mention that, you know, they were really, really good at that. And so I'm sure Garcia thought, you know, like, let's go to the Great Pyramids, man, because we're the Grateful Dead playing at the base of the fucking pyramids. It's going to be, you know, the most insane thing ever. And it really wasn't, unfortunately. Partly because Bill Kreutzmann broke his arm riding a camel right before the show, and so they had Mickey with two arms, but Mickey's not really a drummer. He's more of like a he sort of accentuates things more than, like, he can't play a trap set by himself. Like, he wouldn't do that. So, you know, Billy was really the backbone, and with only one arm, and so it was less than spectacular, but there are moments of extraordinary weirdness, I guess. I think at the end of Althea, there's an improvisation that is staggering in its complexity and precision and improvisation. It came out of nowhere. Another miraculous thing about the Grateful Dead is that, yes, they have devices that they could use to sort of map out these improvisations, but it's also true that a lot of the best stuff that I've ever heard them do will just bubble up out of the band. It's unlike anything ever, and then you never hear any reference to it ever again. You know, they really would just, these things happen once, and that's it. It's never ever even alluded to, and it really just says so much. Just their ability to improvise. It seemed like it was infinite. I've been listening to the Dead. I would imagine at least like 40,000 hours over the decades or something. And I still hear songs that I've never heard them do before. And I still hear things that surprise me. You know, it's like it never ends. The depth and the variety, the creativity of these improvisations and whatnot. You keep digging, and it just keeps going. So anyways, they got permission to go and play Giza. So probably the coolest part of those shows, the Bedouins, who are people that have just inhabited the desert there for thousands of years, without being asked, they just came up out of the desert. This is all on video, by the way. You can probably find it on YouTube. I know that with certainty you can actually buy like DVDs, but I'm sure it's on YouTube. The Bedouins come up out of the desert and just walk onto the stage, and Garcia's like, what the fuck? And he starts noodling around, and the Bedouins start playing. They brought instruments, Um, so they're like, they just start jamming with this ancient Bedouin. So that's how it started, with this like surprise invasion on the stage from the desert dwelling Bedouins, which it's remarkable. It's also remarkable how actually I think they start with their drums, their little hand drums, and Garcia picks it up, and it's amazing how quickly he gets it, because the kind of rhythms that these Bedouins are using are, you know, have nothing to do with Western music, but they probably do have a relationship with some of the other Middle Eastern music. And little known fact is that the Grateful Dead, one of their primary inspirations was actually North Indian music. And the point of it is that you are improvising for these very, very long periods of time until the mind, the consciousness changes as a response to the rhythms, and you hear the same sort of things erupt out of these North Indian ensembles during the improvisations that the Grateful Dead jams, the good ones, how they would climax in this crazy stuff. This, like, the music would be possessed almost by something. And so the North Indian music is actually where they got the concept to have this approach. I actually heard the bass player from Fish talk about this too, and he said that, you know, the truly remarkable moments, you have to improvise, he said, for 10 or 15 minutes if you want to have any chance that these things are going to happen, because you have to enter this altered state, and it takes a while. Yeah, they did sort of know Alexander Shulgin, but let me finish this Giza thing, because this is nuts, man, and I'll remember this chat. That was messing me up last time. I think when I get to the end of my stories, then I'll deal with the chat and come back. Otherwise, I'll keep leaving them unfinished like I did in the last stream. So, the Giza thing. So they go and they play their 3 nights at Giza. On the third night, there was an eclipse. Man, oh God, they let them go into the king's chamber and screw around with the harmonics and stuff, the resonance of it, I guess the overtones that were produced. There's recordings of that stuff too. It's just so much crazy shit. I was really shocked that they let them do that. So anyways, they play their 3 nights. They're not great, which was probably a huge disappointment to the Dead, because I'm sure they thought the fucking skies were going to open and a tunnel to another dimension was going to open or something, you know. I'm sure their hopes were really set really high. But on the third night there was an eclipse, and later on it was discovered, somebody found hieroglyphics that to the effect that there was this band called the Djed, like Djed, or not band, but a group of musicians, basically. There's drawings of them in the hieroglyphics. And they don't look like the Dead or anything. They're almost like stick figures, but still, the Djed, I mean, phonetically it almost matches, would play at the pyramids, and it would mark a transition for the human race from one aeon to another. Very similar to like Crowley's idea about how we were entering a new aeon. And it's also really interesting if you consider that the Grateful Dead's ethos, how they lived, and their philosophy was exactly Crowley's, you know. Basically that the individual will is absolutely sovereign, and that is like the thing of the greatest holiness. You never tell anyone else what to do. You don't try to govern people, you know, like mind your own business, be helpful if you can, you know, but dedicate yourself also to your highest purpose with every breath, every thought, every deed. You know, this is what Crowley was teaching, and what the Dead were doing. And so the Dead know about this prophecy now, and they said that they promised, they had no idea. Oh, and the prophecy mentions that there would be an eclipse while these musicians were playing. It all happened. So, and the Dead swear that they didn't do it on purpose. That, and the fact that I don't think anyone knew about this particular, you know, set of hieroglyphics when they did this kind of supports the fact that it's just either actually the fulfillment of a prophecy or a tremendously improbable coincidence. And the fact that the translation actually sounds like the Dead, I mean, the Egyptians basically wrote, the dead are going to come and play here on an eclipse, and it marks the beginning of a new period in mankind's history. Um, it's it's crazy as hell, man, but it's true. And there are actually papers that have been written where there's a lot more information that go into a lot more detail about the prophecy and some of the astrological things that were going on at the time that seem significant. Okay, so that's the Egyptian prophecy that I missed the last time. While I'm thinking about it, guys, please do me a favor and smash the like button, share, subscribe, become a patron if you want to join our secret streams where I say all the things I don't want to say in public. And also, you can support with cryptocurrency, Cash App, Zelle, or PayPal. There are options in the chat and in the description. We are demonetized. I get no money for this. I'm going to buy a professional microphone tomorrow and an adapter so I can feed my guitar straight into the computer and start doing amazing jam sessions with good quality. But it's going to cost money, and if you guys want me to be able to do these things, I need your support, please. So, yeah, and you know, speaking of hermetics, it's also interesting that the Grateful Dead express a lot of these hermetic principles that you find in the Kabbalion. And it seems to me that when you are living in the flow, and this is what the Dead said about this kind of thing too, that when you're very close to that, you're plugged into the current, right? Like synchronicities are extremely common. Everyone that got anywhere near the Grateful Dead said that it was fucking weird to be around them because all the synchronicities and stuff would happen constantly. All these really weird things were just the norm. And, you know, so it's like you're emanating this stuff because you're just in tune with this thing, and it's really hard to articulate. But another one of the things that you'll notice is that you will also express the laws in interesting ways. So, for example, one of the Hermetic principles is that, you know, as above, so below, and everything contains its contradiction, right? And that one's really important. This is why the yin-yang symbol has like little white dot in the black part and a little black dot in the white part, right? So everything contains its contradiction. The Grateful Dead were the worst band in the entire world on a bad night, but they are also the greatest band in the entire world. And if you understand these Hermetic occult principles, it could not be any other way. If you're going to be the greatest, you're also going to be the worst in some sense. And there's a whole lot of that kind of stuff that you'll notice if you're really paying attention to the Dead's music. So let's move on to Donna Jean Godchild's crazy story that intersects with my own story that I missed a crucial detail. So, and they're both along the same exact lines. I mentioned in the last live stream that I had, you know, said out loud to my then wife that I wish Dark Star Orchestra, the world's greatest Grateful Dead cover band at the time, would have like a school where you could go and learn directly from them how to create this music. Because it really is difficult to figure it out. I mean, it's tricky stuff. It really is. And what I ultimately discovered is that it's about the relationships between the instruments that really makes it unique. It's not so much anything that any one person is doing, which, you know, that was a big part of getting over being intimidated by it. You know, I thought that Garcia was somehow playing the guitar differently, which is true to an extent, but it's really about the relationships within the band. And how they relate. So anyways, I told her that I wished DSO would create a school where, and I wasn't serious, you know, I didn't think it would ever happen. So, like a week later, she comes in the kitchen and hands me her phone, and it says Dark Star High School in Woodstock, New York, and it's like a month away, and I'm like, what the hell, you know, like what are the chances of that it's the only time they'd ever done it. It's not like it was a recurring thing or something. It never happened again. And it was like 2 weeks after I asked for this, and I was doing that sort of thing a lot around this period. And I'm not trying to suggest that I like willed it into existence. I think that the explanation for those kind of synchronicities comes from a deep understanding of symmetry in the universe, but that's a subject for a totally different live stream. But that happened, right? So I didn't know that Donna Jean Godchow was going to be there, and I didn't know that David Granz, who wrote Playing in the Band and actually got to tour with the Dead for like, I think 30, most of their career as an archivist. So he was there for everything. And so that was a surprise. I also didn't know that Rob Baracco, who had played in the Dead when they toured as the Dead after Garcia died, was going to be there too. So it was really quite a shock to find myself sitting down at breakfast and looking over and realizing that Donna was sitting there. So a couple of remarkable things transpired there. Donna is famous for caterwauling, singing like really loud and out of tune and inappropriately, especially in Playing in the Band. You know, there's that build-up part. She would scream right there, right? And that wasn't as bad as it usually really was, right? Like, but it wasn't her fault. People think she was a bad singer, but the truth is that she was a backup singer for Elvis and Ray Charles and you know, a bunch of people like that. Huge, you know, top of the shit heap, you know, legends. It was just so goddamn loud on that stage that she just couldn't hear her. She wasn't accustomed to that kind of volume. So here's how Donna got in the band, in case you haven't heard the story, and it is fucking amazing, and it should really give you the courage to always try to do whatever you think of, because the story I'm about to tell you is not possible. Like, you can't do this. You can't just decide you're going to be in a big famous rock and roll band and then just go like join them because you decided to, which is what Donna did. So there are a couple of things that she did that weekend that really totally redeemed her. I got to watch Donna's redemption in Playing in the Band the second night that she was there, which was awesome. She told us when she was telling the story, actually, those of you that claim that I ruined the Grateful Dead in the mid-'70s, put your dukes up. Nobody knew what she meant, but we would find out that night. So she says, you know, the way that she got into the Grateful Dead was that her friends, she had moved to San Francisco from Georgia. And so it was totally culture shock. She was freaked out, just hiding in her apartment all the time. And her friends kept coming back from Grateful Dead concerts raving like, oh my God, you have to go see this band. It's the craziest fucking thing. It's like a 7-headed dragon orgasm monster. You know, like, it just isn't, it's crazy, you know, we're all tentacles in one mind and all this stuff. And she's like, man, you guys are on drugs. This is just ridiculous, and this band sucks. And they would play her bootlegs, and it sounded like crap. And, you know, she's like, listen to this garbage. What the fuck is wrong with you idiots, you know? Stop taking so much acid. You're frying your brain. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to go see the Dead, but I'm not taking any LSD. And she goes to see the band, and she said she was so blown away that she didn't sleep for 3 days. She was just pacing around the apartment like, I have to get in this band. I want to be in the Grateful Dead. And, you know, how the fuck do I do this? So she meets this guy named Keith Godchow, and they got married 3 hours after they met for some reason. And so she didn't even know he was a keyboard player, and he didn't know that she sang. And so as they're getting to know each other over the next few days, she realizes, wow, this guy's actually a brilliant keyboard player. So let's go see the Dead. So they went to see the Dead a few times, and of course, you know, Godchow reacted to Garcia like everyone did, like, holy shit, man, that guy, you know, because he's just, this energy is coming from the stage that is unlike anything that anyone could ever imagine unless you've witnessed it or experienced it, right? Most people don't even believe in it, which is interesting too, because some people would go to see the Dead and they wouldn't really get it. Because I think if you aren't open to the possibility of something, it can actually preclude your perceiving it, especially if it's something subtle along the lines of energy. A lot of musicians roll their eyes at the idea that some people just have this thing, this energy, and they don't understand why, millions of guitarists can get so good and no one cares, right? If you don't have that thing that people, it's an energetic thing, it doesn't matter how good you are. And so that's something that, Garcia has sort of embodied more than maybe anyone ever. And so she, one night, when like the fifth time they went to see the Dead, Donna goes up to Garcia after the show and taps his boot, and she's like, "Hey, my husband is gonna play keyboards in your band." And at that point, Garcia should have been like, "Lady, don't touch me," or something. You know what I mean? Like, what? Get away from me, weirdo. And the thing is, Pigpen, who was then their keyboard player, nobody knew he was about to die, right? So Garcia didn't even know they needed a keyboard player yet. And this is what I mean about this kind of energy and how these things work, man. It's just, it really defies belief, that it's a coincidence and nothing more. So rather than blowing her off, even though she's just some crazy lady from the audience, Garcia says, "Okay, send them back." And Keith was terrified of Garcia, so he said, "No way, man, no way, I'm not going back there, I'm not going back there." So rather than just saying, "Okay, well, go fuck yourself," Garcia actually came out to the table, sits down, and Keith won't even lift his head up because he's so scared of him. He's just burying his face in his arm, and he's like, "Just talk to my old lady, man, because I can't handle it." And that should have been a deal breaker, right? You're so starstruck, you can't even look at the dude. You would think Garcia would have said, "Okay, man, this is just, you're just a pussy, I'm sorry, like, you gotta at least be able to look at me." And so Garcia gives them his home phone number, and gives him his home phone number? Like, what the fuck is this story, And so Donna calls him at home, and he says, "Okay, yeah, send Keith down to this barn where we're rehearsing." And no one told Garcia that the band had canceled, everyone but him. So one of the biggest nightmares for a musician is to have just an electric guitar and a piano. Like, you don't want that. It's not a good combination, just to have those two things, right? So not only is Keith about to be stuck in a barn alone with Jerry Garcia, I'm sure he pissed himself, he couldn't even look at him. And the whole band isn't there, so he's got to audition alone with Garcia. And not only that, but in this nightmare scenario of only keyboards and guitar. And so as they're leaving, Keith says something to Garcia that is the last thing any band leader wants to hear. "My old lady sings." And I'm sure Garcia went, "Okay," and so Donna was in the Grateful Dead. And I mean, what the hell, this lady literally just decided that she was going to be in the Grateful Dead, and then was. And so what I was saying about when she said, "Put up your dukes if you think I ruined all those recordings," at the show that night with DSO, Donna set in for playing in the band, and when it came to that screaming part, she sounded like a female version of Maynard James Keenan from Tool. It was absolutely amazing. It was like the most powerful female vocalist I ever heard in my life. And she's like long silver hair and this like gangster ass like suit on and sunglasses, and she put her foot on the monitor and just belted that shit out, and after all these years totally redeemed herself. The look on everyone's face in the audience was just like wide-eyed. No one could fucking believe it. It was an amazing thing to get to witness firsthand the redemption of Donna Jean Godchild. Okay, so there's that stuff. I know there's got to be other things that I haven't gotten to yet. Okay, so the curse of the keyboard players. While we're on the subject, let's get to that. Jeff Chimenti is a brave motherfucker because every Grateful Dead keyboard player dies. And it started with Pigpen, right? So Pigpen drank himself to death by the age of 27. He's one of the unknowns in the 27 Club, or the lesser knowns, right? I think he died in 1974. And then, who was next? Keith drove his motorcycle into a train and died, I think, after him and Donna were fired from the band. They said it was a mutual split, but Donna actually said that, you know, being in the Grateful Dead would break just about anyone. All of the drugs and the weird energy, and, you know, it's not like the audience just really liked the band. They basically believed that Garcia was a god, which is going a little far, but it's not exactly untrue either. The people in the band basically referred to him as a fully realized being. Bob Weir used that term in the interviews that come with the Grateful Dead movie. And so, you know, and there was a running joke in the band that, you know, it's not, is Garcia God? It's, you know, is he God or is he the devil? You know, they could never really decide which he was an avatar of. Anyways, the curse of the keyboard players. So Keith drives his motorcycle into a train at 45 miles an hour, I believe. And then Brent died of a cocaine heroin overdose, a speedball overdose. And then the last guy to die was Vince. He slit his own throat at breakfast. And I actually worked in the house where that happened before I left California, which was a really weird thing. I was there just working on a pot garden, and I mentioned the Dead, and the guy that owned the house was like, "Oh yeah, Vince Welnick killed himself in the kitchen there." What the hell? So yeah, he just slit his own throat at breakfast one morning, and so this is crazy too. Dark Star Orchestra was the greatest Grateful Dead cover band, right? Their keyboard player died a few years ago. So it's like you can't even really get close to the energy of this thing without it affecting you. Apparently, when the DSO keyboard player died, also I was just like, what the fuck, you know? And so, in order to break the curse, because they were worried about Jeff Comenti. In fact, when Phil called Vince Welnick to tell him he had the job, the first thing he said to him is, "Your life insurance paid up?" And Vince said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you got the job in the hot seat." And in the movie Spinal Tap, the drummers always explode. That was actually based on the Grateful Dead keyboard players always dying. And so in order to break this curse so that Jeff Comenti didn't die too, when they did the Grateful Dead reunion shows, they got Pigpen's original Hammond B3 and they put it on the stage. So, you know, the thinking was that if it's Pigpen that has been following these keyboard players around and killing them out of jealousy, maybe if we put his B3 up on the stage, then they'll stop dying. And so far, Jeff Comenti is still alive. Oh, the weather phenomena of the double rainbow apparently happened this tour too. You guys remember the last thumbnail I had of the double rainbow from the Santa Clara shows? There's another picture online that I was confused looking at it because you can kind of tell it's a different stadium, and it was like, that double rainbow, something seems different about this picture. And I looked at the caption and realized it happened again. Right around the stage, the double rainbow thing happened again. So I guess Dead and Company has Garcia's blessing. Let's see, where are we at with all of this stuff? Okay, so yeah, well, I mean, actually, there are synchronicities captured in some of my videos that are pretty outrageous. If you check out the Phoenix Process video that I made, click on 1111, and then rewind and listen to what I was saying before that minute marker. And I promise you, I did not edit it. It just happened. So yeah, you know, synchronicities are something that we become aware of, I think, because we have established the rainbow bridge in our own minds, where the subconscious and the conscious mind are communicating more, and so we become aware of this sort of symmetry that is related to our internal processes. It's the as within, so without concept. Well, they'll generally happen after exposure to DMT. There's a lot of increase. Right on, thank you, Zon. Well, I'm not going to try to say your name, Zon, I guess. So DMT does have a reputation for increasing these kind of experiences after you smoke it, and of course, this is another example of the mysteries presenting themselves in a way that casts doubt upon themselves, right? It's like an old mystery school cliche. So this idea that certain drugs can actually change the parameters of your what's available to you to experience. It's not just hallucinations. It's not hallucinations really at all. It's just that your filters are down and you're perceiving more of what is there. And you know, really crazy things happen when you're tripping that normally just would never happen. And it's, I think, because of the relationship between consciousness and energy that we have a very limited understanding of. So another thing that I wanted to mention about, you know, why the Grateful Dead has lasted and they've had such impact is the constant evolution of their music. I can recognize most years within a few measures. So if you put on any show from 1972 or 1974 or 1981, especially the more distinct years where they really their style was like, you know, strong years, I guess. 1972, fall of 89, spring of 1990. I can tell immediately what it is, and sometimes I can tell within a month. Oftentimes I can tell you what show it is. Partly because I've listened to so much, but also because the Grateful Dead really were constantly evolving. How they played was actually changing so much that you could hear from year to year the changes in the music, which is an extraordinary thing. It says a lot about our own capacity to be creative and the limitlessness of our consciousness. It really never ran out for the Grateful Dead, you know, and you would expect that after a while you would start to hear a lot of redundancy and a lot of cliches. The only thing that you could say about that is that when Garcia was feeling lazy, you would hear a lot of these jerry curls. So if he did anything too much, it was those chromatic rolls, right? He did abuse that maybe a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you know, I hesitate to say anything about heroin because my attitude towards it isn't necessarily as negative as a lot of people, and people get mad at me for that. But, you know, what Garcia said about the heroin basically is that, you know, life is hard, and there's nothing wrong with padding it a little bit. And the reality is that if you have a good, clean source and you're rich, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I mean, if you're not hurting anyone... Oh, Enrica just noticed that I'm wearing her earring. That's the first time she's ever said anything in the chat. Everyone say hello to Enrica. That is my partner. I just noticed that. I saw these earrings in the bathroom and I was like, you know, I've never worn a different earring before. So anyways, what was I saying? That totally threw me off. Thanks a lot, Enrica. Yeah, the infinite capacities of consciousness to produce new miracles, you know, and like I said about the Grateful Dead last time, one of the most important things that they taught us was that miracles are not only real, they're actually consistent and reliable, but you have to just create the space and you have to know that these things are possible, and then the universe just kind of creates them. You know, when they had lines in the music, like the music played the band, they weren't being facetious, they were being literal. They called this thing that played them like puppets it, and they said they didn't know what it was. In fact, Garcia once said that he didn't even really know if it was good or not, as in like good or evil. And in my opinion, it was equally good and bad, probably. I mean, it had a very positive effect on the consciousness of the people that were exposed to it, and it still does. But you know, there's also a lot of bad stuff that that came along with the Grateful Dead, drug addictions and people going to prison for decades and decades and decades, and you know, it was definitely a mixed bag, and a lot of people couldn't handle it and became kind of sucked into it in a negative way because, you know, they got weird ideas about who the Grateful Dead was and what this energy was about. You know, so it definitely could have a negative impact on people. Another really powerful element of the yeah, you know, I mean, it's that's what I'm saying. I think everything contains this contradiction, and the universe is ultimately the interplay of antinomies, you know, opposing forces. And so whatever God is, if there's anything, yeah, there you can talk to me in private. I mean, I prefer if you book FaceTime through Patreon, because it's good that I'm compensated sometimes for this, because I'm not, because of demonetization. But I won't ever turn anyone away that comes to me for help if you can't afford it as well. So I just ask that if you can afford to make a contribution, please do. If you don't need anything from me and you can afford to make a contribution so that I can spend time privately with people that can't afford it, please do support us, because we're demonetized. You can find ways to support us in the chat and in the description. I know I mentioned that a couple times in every live stream, but it's because if I don't, no one will do it, and usually people don't anyways. So, but yeah, if you need my assistance, you know, you definitely just send me an email. It's better to not do it through Patreon because they take a percentage. You just send me an email and make whatever contribution you can afford, or not if you're really that broke. I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. Patreon's definitely paid. You can just send me an email. Send me an email. The email in the description will work. So I know there are still things that I've missed here. Okay, so here's another element. We were talking about embodying processes in the universe, like the accuracy and the depth which art manages to reflect the universe. I don't know if I'm saying that well, but how the degree to which art, particularly music, actually expresses the universe, how much, you know what I mean? Like, for example, when we talk about music having good feel, and being in the pocket and this stuff, like, it's sort of like mirroring weight and kinetic energy. So here, I'll just type it for you. There you go. So a good example, right? In 1976, I think the drummers might have been at their best. And there's Dick's Picks 20. If you listen to the Dancing in the Streets jam, on that you'll hear the two drummers are, it sounds like soccer players kicking a ball back and forth. They're like, brah, 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 and the bass is like getting kicked around by these two drummers, and very rapidly, and it's incredible how accurate and fast, because they're improvising, but you know, they're totally just like, they're kicking this ball back and forth, and the dynamic of like how hard the drummer hits the kick drum, that's how far and loud the bass, it'll like slide, you know, like boom, further if he kicks it hard, and so there, you know, it's this mirroring of the laws of nature and how things work in the actual universe in a microcosm, you know, that makes it part of what makes it so powerful. And the Dead really did this in a lot of different ways, and one of the ways was order out of chaos, right? If you look in the description, you'll find links to some performances. And there's a performance of Dark Star from Wembley Stadium in 1972 that I think is one of their peak moments in the Dead's entire career. And there's this long, extended sort of breakdown, and it's also what happens when you're on a strong dose of psychedelics, and your concentration, your mind just starts like melting and warping, and it's just all this chaos. And then, you know, it almost always, unless it ends very badly and you don't get out of it, but it almost always ends in this catharsis. And the reason is that in order for a new order to emerge, there has to be a breaking down of the old order in order to create the space for the movement, for the new order to congeal, right? And so the Dead would do that as well, where, you know, they would allow the music to break down into this completely open, amorphous, just like crazy, spacey nothing. And then it would start to become very, very dissonant, and all of this tension drawing, like in the same way that electromagnetic waves can draw things together and bond them. The tension of the dissonance would pull all of the pieces back together, and then a new melody would come up out of the ether from nothingness. And so they were literally recreating the process of creation of the universe, and that's the song Dark Star, with the lyrics, "Dark star crashes, pouring its light into ashes, reason tatters, the forces tear loose from the axis, searchlight casting for faults in the clouds of delusion," and all that sort of thing. But the lyrics seem to kind of reference this process of solvet coagula, right? This order out of chaos. And so using this occult knowledge, which is what it is, these are when you got initiated into the mysteries, you were basically being taught what the Grateful Dead was using to make themselves so powerful. This is the same reason that Freemasons have created empires that have taken over the world, basically, or part of it, because they use these deep, profound understandings of natural law to create systems that are indomitable and indestructible and powerful. And the Grateful Dead understood this, and they did it with their music. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of people are very suspicious of them, because they've noticed that the same symbols that people associate with the Illuminati and the Freemasons and the mystery schools, you know, the All-Seeing Eye was painted on the back of the Further bus. Phil Lesh's new $3 million base, the Eye of Horus, right? And it has the All-Seeing Eye on the neck. And, you know, there's a lot of references in the music, and they also used the winged sun disk that Hitler used, and that, you know, was above all of the pharaoh's chairs in the pyramids. And so they were definitely initiates and understood all of this stuff. There's actually a really rare book that was written about it that you'd never find, and I can't remember the title, but it's true that they were mystery school adepts, what we call secret societies, and they had a very, very deep understanding of how to actually use this occult knowledge. It's what a big part of what their music was built on. And, you know, you're mentioning the Pythagorean aspect of it. Don't forget that Mickey's beam was tuned to a Pythagorean monochord. This sort of mystery school stuff is present in all over the Grateful Dead's music. I was considering even playing a little bit, but I don't know how this mic is going to pick it up. Our audience is dying, even though this should be relatively interesting, I would imagine. If we get much lower, I'm going to shut it down. Let's see. I know, okay, so then, you know, we're talking about this sort of synchronicities and the insanity of all of it. It seems that Garcia knew that July 9th at Chicago Field was going to be his last show. There are a couple of things that kind of indicate that, and one of them is that So Many Roads, the Grateful Dead never mentioned the magic, or not never, but very infrequently. And if you were an interviewer, you weren't allowed to bring it up. If they started talking about it, fine. But generally, they didn't want it discussed because people thought they were weird enough as it is. Oh man, I didn't tell you about what Garcia said to Rolling Stone magazine last time too. It's absolutely amazing that he said this in a mainstream publication. But let's get through this last one first. So Many Roads. Garcia was a pretty reserved singer, right? He didn't do a whole lot of belting, and so Many Roads. He actually says something about how the rain don't fall and the wind don't blow. Oh, I thought I heard a jug band playing from over on the far side of the hill. If you don't, who else will? And the Grateful Dead actually started out as a jug band. So here's the narrative there, right? Jug band takes LSD, makes $1 billion, and changes the planet. Sounds totally stupid. And has NASA building their sound systems and stuff. Like, it just sounds like some kind of just ridiculous comic book joke or something. But that's what happens. So he makes this reference to that, and then he says, but the wind don't blow and the rain don't fall, and you no longer hear me when I call. And the last tour in '95 was an absolute disaster. 7 of the shows were declared natural disasters. They were bringing the National Guard in to control the crowds. They were flipping over cop cars. People were killed in trees that were hit by lightning, and they were storming the fences to get in for free. On one occasion, there was a death threat against Garcia. The guy said he was going to shoot him, and so they had metal detectors, but people crashed the gate. So if the guy did have a gun and he was serious, he could have gotten through and shot Garcia. Of course, so Garcia comes out and does Don't Murder Me, that song, I can't remember the title of it. Please don't murder me. Dire Wolf. Opens with that, and they went on with the show, even though the FBI was telling Garcia, man, you shouldn't, they broke the fence, we haven't metal detected people, he could be here and he could be serious. So that was the reference in the song. You no longer hear me when I call, the magic isn't working anymore, we're not controlling the wind or the rain. And he's basically singing about dying and going home. So many roads to ease my soul, all I want is one to take me home. And at the end, he starts wailing like never before in his career. It was really, it gives you chills to listen to it. It's in the So Many Roads box set. So that was weird. And then it was the first time since 1981 that they did 2 encores. And Box of Rain, which was written about Phil Lesh's father dying. And I think it was Broke Down Palace, which is also about going to heaven, maybe. It's one potential interpretation. So that was odd. Broke Down Palace, I think. Really, the Grateful Dead stories are just so over the top insane, and there are so many of them. And even my stories that have an involvement with them are, the same. This kind of like just crazy, like that couldn't have happened kind of vibe, right? This is trippy too. I've only run into one member of the Grateful Dead in person outside of the shows over and over and over again until I actually started talking to him, and I was expecting it. The first time I was walking along at Red Rocks and I hear everybody saying, hey Phil, and I'm looking all around and I don't see Phil anywhere, so I just turn around and he's like nose to nose, which was a trip. And then he drove by us later in a limo and stuck his head out and waved. But that's not really the weird part. And this is an interesting example of what this music does. I've seen people in the comments talking about how it's conscious. The music itself is conscious, which I believe to be true, and so did Garcia. They actually, when they quit playing songs like Saint Stephen, they stopped playing it in 1977. Dark Star, they stopped playing for 14, 15 years, something like that. And Garcia said that, the songs are living entities, and sometimes they die, and then they won't they won't, these crazy improvisations aren't going to happen. So he wasn't interested in them anymore, and so songs would literally die. And so you know, this idea that it's like alive and conscious was definitely something that the band thought as well. And so on this one occasion, I had eaten a ridiculously high dose of mushrooms, and I had just gotten a new live concert, and I put it in, and you know, I'm listening, and it gets to one of these really spacey parts, right? And I started listening, and I realized, like, the other guys in the Grateful Dead weren't necessarily good. Like Bob Weir, there was something really wrong there. And later, I would find out some things I won't repeat here that are almost certainly true and really bad. So Weir's maybe, and I think people know that. I mean, people pick up on it. But when you're tripping, I could really feel it. I was like, man, something is not right with Weir. And the mushroom voice, you know, the one that was always talking to McKenna, was like, no, Mickey neither. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, you could think of it like Garcia has constraining demons to his will. Like him and to a lesser extent Phil are like the good ones, the magicians that have constrained these demons to their purposes, basically. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. And so the music was really spacey, right? There wasn't a lot going on. It would just be a little bit of Garcia's guitar and then like a little fill of drums. And then I was like, you know, I don't understand what the hell's, you know, I was just confused. And the mushroom voice said, well, talk to Phil, he'll fill you in. And I was like, oh, that's hilarious, he'll fill me in. And as soon as that voice said that, Phil's bass comes in, you know, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? I had never heard the track before. And as soon as the voice says, Phil will fill you in, this bass comes in, right? So the fact that I actually ended up discussing all of this stuff with Phil Lesh a year later or something is pretty crazy. You know, it's like the mushrooms told me, Phil will fill you in, and in actual reality, Phil ended up filling me in. You know, you can't make this shit up. Okay, so I don't know, questions and comments. I'm thinking there was something really important that I've still managed. We talked about the hauntings, right? That they were carrying around all of these stories of all of these people that had died all these horrible deaths. And so it's like the music was full of spirits. We talked about the weather phenomena that are still pretty much happening to this day. The fact that the Dead were pretty much responsible for distributing all of the LSD from the 60s all the way to the 90s. You know, this gnosis-inducing capacity that they have, that's what I think it is. You know, they expose the consciousness of the people that come to a higher order of mind. And that's why, you know, even people that aren't on LSD at these shows tend to tune into it, because the human brainwaves entrain with each other. And so when you have 60,000 people and they're all in this one state of consciousness, all of the brains entrain. And so, you know, you're basically on acid whether you took it or not. Oh, this is one I didn't tell you guys. The experience of people who aren't on drugs seeing tangible webs of energy in the air, which is like, you know, you see them when you take LSD. Way back in like 2000, I think it was, the Dead had their first, reunion of all the Core 4 members since Garcia had died. I think they called it Terrapin or something like that. And they didn't call Vince Welnick, which is probably why he slit his throat. They had Rob Baracco come and play keys instead, who I would ultimately get to play with, which was amazing, because that guy's like the best. Caminti's better, but Baracco's second best, probably. Okay, so they had their Terrapin reunion show, right? And the guy from Rolling Stone magazine that went to cover it said that he's like, I have never taken LSD. I wasn't even a Deadhead. and he said, I swear to God, I could see these like tendrils of colored energy web hanging above the crowd. That was actually in Rolling Stone magazine. Well, I never really went inside, man. It was, you know, some millionaire's mansion with a huge pot garden in the backyard in Santa Rosa, California. So I wouldn't know if there are ghosts in there. Yeah, so this reporter from Rolling Stone actually claimed to have seen what I know to be the LSD color pattern, the energy that you are able to see when you take psychedelics. This guy took no psychedelics and he said you could see it hanging above the audience. I always see it, but I've taken so much acid, I just assumed that, you know, after a while your ability to perceive these things just remains. That's why people think they get stuck tripping. I think that's not it. You've just brought these filters down and you're perceiving things that are actually there. Okay, so speaking of Rolling Stone magazine, I just remembered another story that I didn't tell. And this is pretty remarkable. So the idea about these filters coming down and having this ability to access information through non-ordinary means. So downloading, a lot of people call it in the New Age scene these days. And this is the source of the infinite creativity that was expressed by the Grateful Dead. And so one time in Rolling Stone magazine, Garcia's being interviewed, and the guy asked him, so how do you guys do it? Like, how do you play a different solo every night for, you know, and not just a different solo, like the entire song will be different. You know, the tempo, one of the things that always blew my mind about them is that they wouldn't click, like nobody's clicking, there's nothing to indicate a tempo, and the whole band jumps into a song, and the tempo is different, the feel is different, but everyone is doing it the same different, right? Like, it all matches. And it's like, unless you're telepathically connected, that makes no fucking sense. And people would accuse them of things, like maybe there's a conductor with a laser marker somewhere, or like they have inner ear monitors and somebody is somehow cueing them or something, and, you know, they're tricking the audience. Oh man. Okay, so, but sorry, I'm going off on a different tangent. So Garcia was asked, how do you guys do it? And Garcia, just in his totally nonchalant way, right? Because that was one of the most amazing things about him. No matter how much people put him on a pedestal and how powerful he was and how much money he had and how extraordinary of a thing he was doing, his ego was pretty well in check. He could be vain and mean even sometimes, but for the most part, he was just so casual about being what he was. Like, no big deal. I'm an avatar for this, like, supernatural force, and that's just nothing. But what he said to the interviewer at Rolling Stone when he asked him how you do it, he said, well, you know, I've taken enough LSD that the filters in my consciousness are just down, and so I can just, there's sort of like these filing cabinets, you could think of it as, in the universe that contain all of the information, past, present, and future, and I can just scroll through it and just get what I need, basically. So that was his answer to Rolling Stone magazine in 1987 regarding how, you know, how they were able to come up with all this stuff over and over and over again like that. Terrapin Station, which is an extremely long song. It starts with the, you know, clean ballad. Terrapin Station. So it's really, really long. It has all these parts. And so Garcia said he was driving down Highway 1 one time, and this whole entire thing came into his mind. And he got home and he goes in the mailbox, and there are the lyrics to Terrapin Station. And it's exactly the right length. It's got like 6 verses and all this. You know what I mean? Like, him and Hunter came up with it pretty much simultaneously. And that sort of thing of just getting these downloads. So yeah, that's the story from Rolling Stone magazine that I forgot to talk about. One of the craziest synchronicities from my own life actually involves sort of the same thing, and I guess it's worth sharing. I think I probably told it before, but this is one of the craziest stories from my entire bag of crazy synchronicities, and it does involve some of the members of the Grateful Dead. So you know, I was a hardcore Deadhead. I had listened to so much Dead that, like I said before, I can recognize any year within a few minutes. Sometimes specific shows, probably a few hundred of them or something. You know, performances. Really just ridiculous. And so I had read everything, I thought, including a book that was supposed to have every interview with Garcia ever. So I thought I'd heard it all. And so I have to back up and give you the backstory a little bit. I had this period in my life where I heard this like internal voice, and it always told me the truth, and it was like teaching me things, and everything it said turned out to be true. And it was very, very like mean, kind of. And I described it as having this hollow, hollow mocking laughter. Hollow mocking laughter. Remember that. It's key to the story. So later I came to call this period in my life the Phoenix process. I have videos about it. And so another element that was really important to that time in my life was Crowley's magic, which is spelled with a K, right? So one day, a few weeks before I was going to see the Further, which was Bobby and Phil from the Grateful Dead. I don't think anyone else. And then Jay Lane, who I ended up playing with later on. I was going to see them on New Year's. So I was online, and somehow I found this interview with Garcia in a magazine called Magical Blends with a K that I had never heard of before. I'd never seen it. And so I start reading it, and Garcia says, yeah, there was this time in my life where this internal voice was guiding me and teaching me things, but it was kind of mean. It had this hollow, awful laughter. So he described this voice in his head exactly, almost, you know, one of the two words, and almost exactly the same way that I did. I said hollow, mocking laughter. Garcia said hollow, awful laughter. And then he says, I came to call it my Phoenix process, which is what I also called this period. And I just dropped my phone, man. I was like, holy shit, like, what the hell is that? This is guy's like my absolute idol, and this experience, we came up with the same term to describe it, and we described the voice as with the same descriptives. Like, that was fucking nuts, right? So then, like 2 weeks later, I go to see Further, and during the set break, like every New Year's, the Grateful Dead has a countdown, and then they'll have some giant paper mache thing come down from the ceiling and land on the stage. Usually there's a beautiful girl throwing roses or something sitting on it. Bill Graham used to ride the thing down from the sky. It might be a big joint one year and, you know, something else the next year. The year prior to this, it had been a dragon that Further used on New Year's. So I go outside for the set break, and I got into this conversation with these people, and I'm like, okay, so, you know, the universe was like nothing, and then it became conscious, and this kicked off this process of repetition or reflection and repetition that, you know, and on and on and on. And so eventually, once it's exhausted all of its possibilities, the light all consumes itself, and the matter is all consumed, and it collapses back on itself, and then there's another singularity, and it starts all over again. And that's actually now called quantum loop theory, and it's one of the leading theories in physics. And this came to me just from taking psychedelics, right? Which is nuts. Like quantum loop theory, check it out. You guys can actually find videos of me talking about this before quantum loop theory existed. Not trying to brag, but I'm just saying. this idea of being able to access this type of information is fucking real. You know, I've been doing it for decades. So I'm talking about all this stuff, and there were these two kids leaning against a wall with eyes, the pupils just, you know, they're tripping balls, and they heard bits and parts of what I was saying, bits and pieces. So they called me over and said, hey, could you explain that to us? So I went through the whole thing again, and then I said, it's all about the phoenix. That's the central, you know, myth to understand. And so we go inside, and they do the countdown, and this year it's a fucking phoenix with lightning bolts in its hand, flies down from the ceiling and lands on the stage. And I just was imagining those kids' heads exploding. Like, it was just so insane. The last thing I said to them was, it's all about the phoenix, and then this phoenix drops from the ceiling and lands on the stage. And then so, you know, on top of all that, the next day in San Francisco, which is a huge city, obviously, I'm sitting on the sidewalk playing guitar or something, and those two kids come walking up, and they're like, man, we've been looking for you since last night. How did you do that? You know, and I was just like, I didn't do it. That's not how this stuff works. But yeah, they just found me, I guess. We're looking for you in a city of 3 million people or whatever, and then they just find me, like, with 20 minutes or whatever. And I wasn't staying around in the area around the show or anything. It's like way across the city. But yeah, man, and when you talk about crazy synchronicities, that was like, and you know, and notice the theme of the Phoenix, right? Because the Phoenix process was present in the article from Jerry, and then 2 weeks later, when I went to the Further show, I say this thing about it's all about the Phoenix to these kids, and we go in and they're flying a Phoenix down from the ceiling and it lands on the stage. It's this kind of symmetry in the wiring under the board in the universe. And the thing about synchronicities is that when there's actually conceptual continuity that spans years, it gets to be really difficult to think of it as coincidence, and not to feel that there must be something deeper influencing it all. So, I don't know, are you guys convinced? I'm not trying to convince you, but you probably should be for your own good, you know? So let's see, 9:24, what should we do? How does this sound out there? Okay, I thought it was really warbly. I didn't like it. I wanted to try to play with a backing track or something maybe at the end, but I don't think this microphone will do it justice. But if you guys want to call out Grateful Dead songs and see if I can play them off the top of my head, we played that game a little bit at the end of the last live stream, and somebody got me with Loser, man. That was really surprising because I should know that. I do. Yeah, okay, so anybody have Franklin's Tower? And then paradise waits on the crest of a wave, her angels in flames. Yeah, I don't remember all that, but I actually got to play Help on the Way, Help Slip Frank with Jay Lane and Robin Sylvester from Rat Dog before I left California, and I do have a recording of it, so maybe I should put that on the channel or something at some point. There's actually Jay and I sang a cappella together. What is that song? The Jesus song. The Beat all the children that would not be good. Good night. Good night. Oh, I love you. Oh, but Jesus loves you the best. Okay, so what? Friend of the Devil? Alright, so I got them all so far, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could try to do something with the backing track. I'm afraid, though, it might take, yeah, because it's only 9:30. Let's see if I can do this. I might be, uh-oh, my face froze. That probably means that, that's funny expression too. Frozen goofy style. Okay, so let me see if I can make this work. I should probably put this closer to there though. See how this sounds, guys. I'll make an attempt. How about I don't know. How about Mississippi Half Step? And like I said, you know, tomorrow we're going to finally get me a mic and a interface so I can hopefully. Oh, New Speedway Boogie for sure, man.